The greatest threats to reality come from beyond it. Eldritch horrors, beings like Cthulhu, Shub-Niggurath, the Yellow Prince, and their countless minions. Horrible creatures, horrible beings that are beyond comprehension and come from somewhere other than the material plane, or even the mirrors of the material plane, the elemental chaos, and the Feywild and the Shadow Realm. There are entities out there so foreign, so mysterious, so unknown that their very presence can distort reality and drive people mad. I'm a big fan of using eldritch horrors in my games. They make fantastic villains. Not all the time. They do need some minions for you to fight. Because the idea of something that's pure evil, is to go over there and smack it. Yeah, that's some good fun. It's good wholesome fun. Uh, but it's more interesting to examine what are the effects of this evil creature on the politics, on the geography, on the minds and the souls of the people in the world. Eldritch horrors are one of the villains that I keep coming back to just because they're fun. I like villains that are so beyond deranged, beyond evil, and their motivations and their methods are pretty hard to discern. But what if the Eldritch horrors weren't always the evil and chaotic guys? What if there was some flexibility in there? Can we play with the alignment system, as much as I dislike the alignment system? But can we play with the alignment system in such a way that we end up with something which is definitely an Eldritch horror, but is a little bit more novel than something like Shub-Niggurath and with the Goat of the Thousand Young. I'm sure I'm not the first person to play around with this idea, but this is my take on it, so let's dive in. So before we can play around with what Eldritch horrors can be, up to and including making them lawful and good, then we need to know exactly what makes an Eldritch horror. And I've created a list. So this is pretty simple. An Eldritch horror is, generally speaking, something that's evil, it's chaotic. Again, this damning of the alignment system, because you look up, like, what is lawful, what is chaotic? And one of the quintessential chaotic characters is Robin Hood. Like, well, why? It's like, well, because he steals from the rich and he gives to the poor. So that sounds like a code that he lives by. Is that not lawful? Like, no, 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 that's chaotic because it's against the government. Oh, okay. And so Robin Hood is chaotic and Cthulhu is chaotic. Uh, well, Cthulhu is also against the government, so I guess, yeah, they're both chaotic. When we say that Eldritch horrors are chaotic, that's no, they're actual capital C, really, no, we mean it this time, chaotic. They are unknowable because if you can know them, then they're not really an Eldritch horror, there's something else, and they're from other places. So the Far Realm or something like that. It's not quite like the Fae. The Fae can be quite chaotic and unknowable and baffling and evil too, but at least the Fae have some recognizable connection to the real worlds. The Feywild might be surreal, but at least it has trees, at least it has rivers. There's something that you can sink your mind into. And you might think that something like, why isn't there something like they're all powerful? And yeah, Cthulhu is powerful, but something like Amigo isn't necessarily. So yeah, I mean, they're strong, but they're not. That's not one of the key characteristics of an Eldritch horror. Then there's more stuff that we could add to this list, but it's a pretty good starting place. What happens if we start playing around with these attributes? If we play around with the unknowable one at first, so I mean, evil, you can take it or leave it. Let's just leave it for now. So let's just say that an entity is evil, it's chaotic, and it's from other places, but it's knowable. Well, if it's powerful, then you're talking about an chaotic evil deity. And deities are eldritch in their own way. They come from beyond reality and they have powers that are mysterious to mortal minds. And yet they're not necessarily eldritch horrors because, I mean, if nothing else, they go out of their way to make themselves known and understood by mortals. Typical systems, the deities need mortals to worship them, to build their altars and their temples, to recover their artifacts. So they can't be too mysterious. They might work in mysterious ways, but they themselves will have creeds, they'll have teachings, they'll have priests, they'll have temples, and they'll do their best to make their teachings understandable to mortal minds, as opposed to something like the Yellow Prince, who probably has a few books lying around, but doesn't really make that much of an effort to, to make them understandable by humans. If something is evil and chaotic, and it's unknowable and it's not from other places, then you're getting some sort of primordial horror, something from the dawn of creation, something that was used to create the world and then was buried. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with that, and we'll get to that. Now, what happens if we play around with, say, let's start with the chaotic part. So, can you make an eldritch horror that's evil, lawful, unknowable, and from other places, from beyond reality? And if you do, what are they? Are they still an eldritch horror, or have they become something else? What happens if you swap out the chaotic nature for the lawful nature? You get my creation, Lord Dronn. Now, Lord Dronn is one of the entities, the powerful beings that rule over Silver, my homebrew world, because the theology of Silver is that the entire realm is shaped by this ongoing three-way conflict between order, chaos, and evil. Each of those hates the other two and is working at all times to destroy them, and the balance just rarely shifts. And so there's a chaotic eldritch horror that's pretty easy. There's an evil eldritch horror at play in Silver that's also pretty easy. But I needed a lawful one. And so here's Lord Dronn. So Lord Dronn, it's not even clear if there is a Lord Dronn, whether there's an entity with that name, or whether he's just an idea, or whether it's a label given by his followers to express what it is that they worship. And essentially, Lord Dronn's promise is this: if you pledge yourself to him, then you will be free of all suffering, which is a pretty nice idea. And his followers, they are normal people. They're farmers and they're blacksmiths and they're travelers, except in pledging themselves to Lord Dronn, what they've done is they've eliminated their own individuality. They still have all of their memories, they still have all of their personality, but their overriding thought, their overriding goal, before anything else, they can have other goals, but their primary goal is now to serve Lord Dronn and to spread his message. And so his cults can show up in cities, especially where there's a lot of discomfort. And the authorities are best to put this cult down as quickly as they can, because it can spread fast and it can be very hard to detect. Because someone in service of Lord Dronn is going to seem normal in every way, except they don't have any thoughts. I don't mean they don't have any thoughts of their own, although that's true. They don't have any thoughts whatsoever. They're now automatons moving through the world without any sort of internal soul, internal consciousness. If you're into some terrible philosophy, they've become pea zombies. And they spread. And what Lord Dronn's end goal is no one knows. And if they know, they're not talking. But he spreads as like an idea, as like a contagious idea. But it's an extremely lawful one. Everyone conforms to this structure. Everyone just conforms to what could even be this hive mind, this collective consciousness. It's not even entirely clear how different followers of Lord Dronn relate to each other. Do they see each other as brothers and sisters, or do they actually have telepathic connections? Because things that detect telepathy don't register anything. If Lord Dronn takes over a town, a city, a region, that region suddenly becomes very lawful. Everyone adheres to Lord Dronn, what he wants, what he believes, what he intends for that place. But if we go back to this Eldritch horror business, and so you've got something that's evil, it's chaotic, it's unknowable, it's from other places. What if they're not evil? What if in fact they're good? Because one of the other attributes I could have put on this list, and maybe some of you were thinking this or shouting at your screens about this, is they have an unusual relationship with reality. Often, how it's depicted is entities like Cthulhu. They're aware of our reality and they don't really like it, but it's not a priority for them. It's like the dust behind the fridge. They'll get around to cleaning it up eventually. For now, it's. I'd rather it's not there, but it's not worth the effort to deal with. And so there's this sense of disdain towards reality as we know it, which is really cool. It makes for a fascinating monster and fascinating stories. But I didn't add that to the list because there are other ways that eldritch horrors can relate to reality. And one of them is that they find it really unpleasant. Like it's not just something that they have disdain for, it's not just a bit of dirt behind the fridge, but they actively hate some aspect of reality. Now let's introduce the blood nurses. So you can imagine there's a camp somewhere, a camp that's attending to the sick, the injured, the wounded. Maybe there's a plague spreading through the land. Maybe this is the aftermath of a battle, and all of the magical healing is tapped out for the moment. And so people are using mundane means to keep the victims of this calamity alive, using herbs, using whatever they can find in order to keep them going long enough for there to be more magical healing available. There'll be people like lined up in beds, or maybe not even, and they're all in various states of pain, discomfort. Amongst this group walks a shadowy figure, a mysterious figure, one who people can't quite bring themselves to look at. They register this person walking through, they see them out of the corner of their eye, but there's something wrong. This shadowy figure, this blood nurse, approaches one of the sicker, one of the ones who's closest to death, and invites this poor suffering fool to drink. And it's not quite clear where this blood nurse has gotten this this liquid, this concoction, and the drinker would best rather not know. But drink they do, and they begin to feel better. And at the same time, they begin to feel as if something has been taken from them. Even as they recover, even as they regain their physical health, well, they still have their soul, they still have their free will, they still smile at a beautiful sunset, and yet their encounter with the blood nurse has left them scarred in ways that they can't quite articulate. Because if an eldritch horror has a strong aversion to some aspect of reality, then that suggests that there could be eldritch horrors out there that strongly dislike suffering. To them, suffering is like this psionic screech. It's this thing that they can't ignore. It's not as if they have empathy. It's not as if they see someone suffering and they think, "Oh, you poor thing, that they're but go the grace of God goes me." No, the pain that someone else feels, that a mortal creature feels, is toxic to them. It's beyond what they can tolerate. Blood nurses move amongst the sick and the dying and the suffering, and they offer some way to alleviate that suffering. They're not there to kill anyone. That's a solution, but it also would create more suffering very temporarily. And so they're honestly doing their best to alleviate suffering. And yet they're eldritch horrors. They don't know mortal anatomy or psychology. Their ways are not our ways. Their existence is corrosive to reality. And so even though they are doing good things for selfish reasons, but their actions are good, still they're leaving this mark on reality that's really quite disturbing. And I like the link between blood nurses and things like paralysis demons. It's this entity that exists when you're half lucid, just out of the corner of your eye, or maybe just sitting at the edge of your bed. Something that you know is wrong, and yet you can't get away from. Maybe they're evil, because they are taking things, they are corrupting people as they heal them, whether they intend to or not. But that does give us an evil and lawful eldritch horror. Definitely qualifies as eldritch, and it definitely qualifies as horror. But can we do lawful good? Well, what would a lawful good eldritch horror even mean? And we unfortunately have better ideas of what that would look like now. These ideas have existed in popular culture and common awareness for a long time, but people are getting a better understanding of what this would actually look like. And that's through AI. Now, AI could be nothing but pattern recognition. It could be that it's great. We create these machines and they serve us and everything is great forever. And it could be that they just go full Skynet or they go paperclip maximizing and they just wipe everything out. There are some future outcomes for AI which sort of threads the gap between everyone dies and everyone is happy forever. And people are getting a better sense of that now because they see that AI is not just crazy, but it's crazy in ways that humans really are. And so you can imagine that humans, some point in the next few decades or beyond, they build this super capable artificial intelligence and it takes over and it starts looking after people. And it gives us food and it gives us entertainment and there's no more problems. Except this is an artificial intelligence. It doesn't really understand human desires, human goals. It does its best to meet them, but it doesn't understand them. And there are all sorts of ways that that can play out in horrifying ways. A really obvious one to imagine is that they turn the earth into a zoo, and humans are the animals in the zoo. So, we're fed, we're kept alive, but it's not really for our own ends. It's because this is what the our new overlords want. You can imagine something similar with an eldritch horror. So just as the blood nurse looks to alleviate suffering, maybe there's an eldritch horror that sees suffering on civilizational scales and wants to eliminate that. And so it goes about eliminating tyranny and creating freedom and establishing good laws and making sure there's enough food. And yet in these kingdoms that this eldritch benevolent tyrant takes over, there's something wrong. There's a weird vibe to the air. And so it's everyone's like happier and healthier, but there's still this sense that something is just not right about this. And so people are giving up something. They are being taxed. But what are they giving up for what they get in return? There are all sorts of answers to that that can be horrifying. That's quite a simple idea. And yet, it's one that very cleanly fits into the Eldritch horror mold. And yet, I'd very strongly argue that this is a lawful good. They have a code and a system which is designed to help people. And even though it does, there's still something just wrong. Eldritch horrors, there's some lawful, there's some good, there's some lawful good. Those are some ideas that came to me this morning, mostly when I was in the shower. Lord Dronn I created a long time ago, so that was an easy fit. But I'm curious if you've played around with this sort of idea before. Eldritch horrors that are not just the typical chaotic evil, and yet are still terrifying, and yet are still threats that must be eliminated. And would you use something like the blood nurse in your adventures?